everyone. Welcome back to session 14 of 2023's AWC, sponsored by Fictionary, which is a writing software. You can definitely check that out. It is in the comments as well as in the description. And we're so excited to have you here with my other half of Flash Fiction Live, Natalie Locke.
Yeah, sister from another mister. We're cut from the same cloth. Her side is just all dark and horror writing, and mine's like happy twists that everyone lives.
Yeah, we definitely balance each other out in that.
Yeah, yin and yang. We got it. But yet we're quite similar. Like we have the same thought process. She has Dobby bothering her. I have my son Spencer bothering me. But I'm Natalie Locke, other half of Flash Fiction Live, and I also just finished presenting with Chandra on my channel regarding broadening your inspiration. So this is more about how to utilize resources.
And I want to put it out there before we get started, just be thinking about this because we'll have some Q&A at the end. So if there's something specific that you're researching and you're kind of having a hard time with, put it in the comments with a Q in front of it so we can take a look at it during the question and answer session. And we can kind of just hit you with some thoughts about where we would start and hopefully, lend a hand with that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into it. We do have quite a few resources, and what I'm going to try to do is drop some of the links into the chat as we talk about them, and I'll also share some of how I've used it in the past. So one of the things I like to start with, we'll have general just like web resources that you can start with. The thing that I like about these is it's kind of easy to keep them bookmarked and jump in there and answer quick questions of things that you might find while you're writing. So I know I had a specific scenario in a historical fiction piece that I was writing where I was like trying to come up with a budget on the fly to figure out how much money a character needed to have and what kinds of things, how far that would get them. And so that's how I found this first resource here. And I don't have that link. Here we go. So this is in 2013 dollars, and I'm going to drop that in the chat here. But this is an inflation calculator, so it'll give you a lot of options, and you can kind of set the time that this would happen, and it'll allow you to look back at money from that time period that you're setting it to. Now, it doesn't go back, sometimes too terribly far, but it does give you a lot of ideas and options on, if you go back several years, what you might find. So depending on how far back your story is going, you'll definitely have some options there. One of the things that I like about researching is that you get to see your story from another side. And I know there's talk about some info dumping, and we talked about this a little bit in Natalie's stream of like saturating yourself with a lot of information so that what you can put into the story is really refined and kind of a synthesis of all of the information instead of, info dumping or giving too much. Love that. Oh, awesome. Yeah, if you have a link for one of those, if you want to share that, we would absolutely love to see it. Those are handy resources. And like I said, I definitely recommend grabbing these and links. I like to keep them all in my Google Keep and just kind of have a list of different resources that I use. But I find that to be really, really helpful. So one of the next ones that I use a lot is for date and time. And that will give you like a converter basically telling you like what day of the week it would be, what the date would be based off of, different factors that you can put in, but it'll convert that, and you can also use it to convert time zones and things like that. So that's very helpful. So I use date and time, and I also use on this day and Win Calendar, which gives you a list of different holidays and things like that. So I'll also put those in the chat, Natalie. Those are in the doc, the Google Doc. And then another one that I really like is historical weather information. And it's wunderground.com/history. So those all give you, the first set give you date and times. And so you can go back and actually look at the historical weather using the historical weather information Underground. So I like to use those kind of together to get a more precise picture of climate, specific weather, especially, if you're writing something historical and you are being very precise with the date. You don't want to go back and say it was the 23rd of December and the ground was covered in snow, and so happens that actually was a warm snap that year and they were dealing with flooding or something like that. I know that might be, kind of specific, but I like to think in terms of great detail. And a lot of the preferred history books that I read, or historical fiction that I read, tends to be in great detail. And even if you decide to veer off from that or approach it slightly differently, a lot of times you'll see in the preface of the book or the author's notes where they're like, yes, I know it wasn't like this. I changed it because creative license, leave me alone. So it's nice to be able to say, yeah, I know what we're talking about. And I'm doing that differently because of, creative license, or because it makes sense for the story, or things like that. So I think it's important to have those notes. And just because you have the information, you may keep it in mind if it's not super relevant to the story. But as the author, you always know more about the world and about the story than the reader does. And so that can be really helpful. So I usually start there when I'm building the story, but when I start to get into more detail and I'm needing a bit more information, like once you establish the weather, things like what the fashion is become more relevant, more important, what people are wearing and why they're wearing it, and seasonal fashion. And of course, fashion does change very quickly. So finding resources for things like that can be really important. And I know one of the things Natalie was talking about on her stream was how to find these different things. A lot of times, the easiest way to get that information is from social media and historical cosplay channels and things like that. You can get a lot of information from the descriptions of the clothes to seeing how people put them on and what their purposes were. It'll give you a lot of ideas, even if you're wanting to take something and have, I think this is probably super, super commonly done, where, a woman will dress in men's clothes for trope reasons in the story, like, well, what is she wearing and why? Or even if you're looking at shows like Gentleman Jack, where, there are historical figures who are largely covered up because they didn't conform to gender norms at the time. So finding those kinds of things and seeing that it's not exclusive to now, as a lot of people would lead us to believe, but that these kinds of things have been happening since the beginning of history. It's really nice to be able to include those fine details in the story. So one of the things that I really like to do, keeping all of that in mind and starting to find context, is I like to use the Library of Congress. And this is something that anyone can use. And there's no charge for this. I will say it can be quite a rabbit hole. You can dig very deep into it. But what I found the easiest to look for in the Library of Congress would be maps, newspapers, and photographs. So if you're looking for something specific, a specific location, and older maps of that location, if you think about it, most major cities have had at least one great fire and one great flood. So based off of when you're writing the story, I really like to do this, because if you want to create areas or streets or build a world around something that doesn't exist anymore, there's a lot fewer limitations, because nobody's going to say, well, it's not like that. I mean, yeah, you took a map and you figured out some stuff, but maybe that area wasn't, largely built up, or, those kinds of houses burned more. So, it took longer for this to be reinforced. No one's to tell you that it's not there now, but no one necessarily knows specifically what was there before. So looking at the maps prior to those fires or floods can give you a lot of information, and Library of Congress is a really great way to find those. Also for newspapers, if you are writing headlines, and I talk about this in one of my other videos of using newspapers and other things that are going on at the time in order to create your setting without having to say specifically what the date is in the newspaper. You can talk about what's happening at the time. And so if you are needing to place a date, you might use your date and time calculators and all of those kinds of things. Layer that, go back and look up a newspaper for that area for that time, and use that to root your character in the time period, writing with the headlines and things like that. So you can definitely get more precise, get more specific there. One thing I really like to do is for your local library. Now, this does require a library card, and I was going to do a demo on it. Only my library is currently not, they're not doing their previous way that this was done, but this was borrowing a book from another library. For example, my library is not a research library, but they do have a library lending program. So that used to be going into their website and filling out a form. It's not that right now. You just email a specific email address that they have listed and tell them what you're looking for. The more books, the more information you can find out or share about the book, title, author, the ISBN, all of that kind of information, as much as you can share with them, and they can look at libraries in the area and have it shipped to them for you to borrow. So that is a really nice resource. And there, I will say, this is something that can be difficult. Not all libraries, like in my area, most of the libraries here are not research libraries. So it does, yes, the interlibrary loan, it does make it a bit more challenging to find some information. But this is where some of the other resources come in. If you have a community college, you don't have to be going to that community college to go in and use their library. Most of the time, you can just go in during their regular library hours and look at what they have available. The same thing goes for universities. If it's a physical book on site, typically they'll let you just come in, take as many notes as you want, and find different things like that. I will also say, when you start to get into the specifics of a book, that was a fun hunt. I really enjoyed that. If you start to get into the specifics of a book and the book doesn't have a lot of details, and that's something that I came up against recently, and this is where you might find some more information in the appendix of the book. A lot of times it'll reference articles, periodicals of the time, newspapers, which is where going back to the Library of Congress may be very helpful for you. So you're going into a book, you get to the footnote, it'll link back to the appendix. The appendix will tell you if it's an article, if it is a book or a magazine or a periodical. Sometimes it's just a flyer. You may be able to find copies of those in the Library of Congress, sometimes in your local library if it is an archive, but also for university libraries, which again, you don't have to necessarily go there. A lot of the older stuff that they have will be in physical copy, and they're usually really happy to have you come in there. But again, you can't check those items out. Where being an alumni really helps is if you are needing to look at their digital copies and things like that. A lot of times they won't let you do that unless you have attended and you're an alumni, or if you're a current student. So a lot of times those can be very helpful. After that, I also would say there's auditing classes. If there's a specific class that you're wanting to look at, if there's more information that you're looking at there, auditing classes can be a really good resource. Or depending on your job, some offices and some jobs do also offer a work library. So if you're an employee there, you may be able to find some specific resources from your work library if that's something that they're open to sharing with you. So within tracing resources, I know I'm kind of flying here because we just have a little bit of time, but within tracing resources, I did mention looking back at the appendix. Also, I know, and this is where we kind of diverge from writing collegiate papers and things like that. But at the bottom of pretty much every Wikipedia page, you'll see their sources, and some of them have some really great links. And you might find physical books that you want to look up based off of those links, or they may link to other websites, things like that. It'll be easier sometimes to find just if it's linking to another website, but it may also be one of those things where you have to take that information to your library and look for those kinds of things. One thing that I did notice with books, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it depends on the kind of information that you're looking for. With books, you're going to see a lot more of like the opinions of the book are filtered through the view of the author. So if you're looking for something that's more specific of just like factual stuff, their sources may trace back, again, depending on the subject, to another book, which then may trace back to an original source. So a lot of times you're looking at secondary sources, or it's not even quite a secondary source. It may just be a quote from the original source or from a prior source. So just keep that in mind as far as the accuracy of the information and how specific it is. But pretty much, books, Wikipedia, and articles will all have their original sources listed somewhere in the document that you can find, and then start to hunt those down. And so that's the kind of information that you'll want to take to your library or to the lending library, and then start finding, where are these original sources. So one thing I found, even if your local library doesn't have it, which some rarer books that may be the case, you can also look on eBay. You'll find quite a few older books on sale on eBay, and those can be some really good options. In fact, I found some books there that were where like a library was getting rid of their old books, and they're just selling it to get additional funds for the library, and you can get some really great books, gently used and well cared for. And if it's a subject that you're needing a lot of resources on, then that can be super useful. The other thing that I found is, although there's some books that are just like, they have a lot of useful information on a specific subject, a lot of them may be just saying the same thing. So if you see that, even when I was researching specific subjects at my local library, I would go in and try to find those details where they're all linking back to the same book, they're all referencing the same book, and go from there. I know I'm coming up on time here, so I definitely want to make sure I'm getting in some questions. Ooh, that sounds really fun and really interesting. If you are looking for any resources or needing any assistance with researching, definitely feel free to reach out to me. I have some options listed on my Ko-fi as well, and you can message me on Instagram. One last note that I want to throw out there, because this may be my favorite resource. If you find literary papers, just like a PDF of someone's paper, reach out to the author. A lot of times professors, they are so happy to talk to literally anyone who's interested in their area of expertise. They will send you resources. They will send you suggestions about where to look. And they tend to know more consolidated information about any one specific subject than pretty much anybody else. So they're a great resource. They've usually got their email address listed on the website, and they're happy to answer questions. I have a master's in history and teach at community college level. See, that's awesome. And look at that. You've got tons of people in your community that you can reach out to as well. I feel like this is me right now, so I'm very happy to talk on this subject, just going on about it. This one. Absolutely. And that's the other good point about this. Reading that, I'm sure there are resources and points where someone is, like the forward or anything like that, where you can find the name of someone to reach out to, find the other resources that they referenced as far as like the location, the maps, all of that kind of stuff. A lot of times older books will have a map in the front of the book, which is fabulous. So I think we got all of the links in the chat, and I know we're running right up against time, but definitely remember to fill out the feedback form. There are giveaways from that. Don't forget to try our sponsor, the Fictionary service. Check that out, and in the description you'll find a link which will give you a month free trial. And I'm going to see who's coming up next. I know at 1:20, Heather has a stream with, there's a panel, so definitely check.
Joe Wrights is doing starting now, as well as Chandra's Ko-fi is listed below and in the chat. So go check out her resources, definitely.
Yes. So thank you all so much. Have fun on your continued AWC journey. I know there's been a ton of information, and like I said, you can always reach out to me in Instagram, in my DMs, or on Ko-fi. I'm happy to assist with any kind of research. So we'll see you next time.